So I was just replying to YouTube comments on my day off wearing the traditional Overwatch coach's attire, and I somehow have managed to completely miss this development update, and it is completely and utterly insane. This one is directly from Custer, and I thought Custer was going to be a really good influence on the design team in general, because clearly if anyone knows how the gameplay flow and theory about the game works, it's going to be Custer. I want to talk a bit about design versus balance. These two things have completely different scalars and are almost completely divorced. Heroes that are badly designed tend to be overly oppressive in certain scenarios, force certain picks out of enemies or your team, and people just in general choose, if they can, not to play against it. Now, none of this necessarily has anything to do with balance. Balance, if bad enough, will cause high ban statistics, but these two things don't have to be knitted together. I'm very concerned that we're slightly conflating the two, and I'm also concerned that we're not just using as our baseline the underlying theory of the game in order to work out what should be done. The worst part, in my opinion, is that people can identify heroes that are badly designed without identifying the reason for their bad design or drawing the correct conclusions as to how to fix them. And this goes for the community, and this goes for the dev team in general. I think one of my biggest complaints about the dev team is misattributing the reasons for these types of things. Now Custer says, "Hey everyone, Scott here, reporting from the hero design team about a subject that's always at the forefront of our mind: balance. This is one of the trickiest parts of game development and often one of the hottest topics in the Overwatch community. We want to show you a bit of what the process looks like from start to finish and how we arrive at balance changes, from hero specific adjustments to whole game modifications. You also get a sneak peek at some changes coming to Season 17. One of my main concerns with hero bans is that the developers said they were going to use these as statistics to inform their balance decisions in the future, and immediately after that, almost immediately, they proceeded to just buff Widowmaker's spread and primary fire damage and increase her Venom Mine perks damage for seemingly no reason despite her having a high ban rate. Now, these changes of course are meant to target the low ranks, whereas in high ranks people are getting the most out of a sniper, in low ranks people can't do that and therefore they need something to back them up. But realistically, what the changes in practice do is make the character a definite necessary ban on the sniper maps, while making the character more or less balanced on the maps where they are okay. I think this is really hard to unknit here. We have a problem with the skill scaling of a character, the balance of the character at two different points, the design of the character making them feel differently oppressive at different ranks, the design of the character making them feel differently oppressive on different maps, and my issue is that instead of actually tackling the character head on, what we've realistically done is just pass off the balancing to the players instead of tackling it as a design team. If it wasn't obvious from weekly recall blogs and director's takes, we're big fans of data here on the Overwatch 2 team. Some of our balance changes are inspired by tangible numbers that come from various sources, like pick rates or win rates. We aim to keep heroes within a set win percentage range of 45 to 55, and if they deviate from it, we know something needs to be done. This is less about making all heroes viable in every situation, and more about ensuring no hero is ever universally a wrong choice. Now, this is a very good goal in my opinion. 45 to 55 is quite a big win rate margin, so they're not overly trying to push stuff towards the middle to make them viable in all scenarios. They're okay with a character having a low win rate on certain maps, but they do want them to be within a reasonable margin. I think we all agree that if we're going to make a hero-based shooter, what we should be focusing on more than anything is making sure the widest variety of heroes and playstyles are available in the majority of situations. Hero ban data has added a whole new set of information we can use, and this feature essentially gives you all a direct line to the balance team by way of collected data. High ban rates are a concrete indicator that a hero is an issue for a large subset of players, and leads us to take a much closer look as to what we can do to improve the experience of playing against certain heroes. Contextualizing the data we've gathered is important, and it helps us identify changes that need to be made. For example, Widowmaker has a decently high ban rate on sniper playgrounds like Havana, but that doesn't mean she needs immediate changes. Some players just don't want to catch a headshot right out of spawn. So I don't understand what's happening here. I mean, they have drastically buffed Widowmaker's ability to duel out DPS on maps like Havana unless she is banned. You either basically hit the ban on that map now, or everyone has a terrible experience because she can't be dueled out by a DPS in the same way she was before, and in addition, she's really dominant on the map. Freya is an excellent example of how we already use hero ban data to make improvements. Her win rates were low after she was introduced, so we strengthened parts of her kit to make her more impactful. However, as players get better with the kit, her ban rate skyrocketed at the highest skill tiers. Above diamond rank in competitive mode, Freya is the most banned hero in multiple regions. Data is helpful to identify a specific issue, but after we look at your feedback and delve into how a hero feels within matches, for Freya we asked ourselves what her pain points were and analysed community input. The biggest concerns you shared was how oppressive she felt, especially when allowed to spam damage while airborne. Now this is really interesting to me because I think that the dev team and the player bases have in part misunderstood what makes the character feel oppressive to them. Sure, her flight uptime did cause one of the avenues of feeling oppressive to exist. It's the fact that most characters don't interact with her very well when she's flying. This is a standard Farah hit scan problem. So reducing the amount of time they're allowed to spend in the air is massively important for balancing the hero, because what that's going to do is make it so that they're less restricting on the enemy team's hero picks. But what I think is a problem is the development team has clearly misunderstood another problem in the kit. It wasn't only that she existed permanently in the sky, is that she always had access to the sky and a big burst of damage when it is needed. The thing with having a big burst of damage is that simply holding that big burst of damage means that other players can't do things. If I have a Zen trance, then the enemy team can't run into me because they know that trance is going to go off. They have to bait it first. In exactly that same way, Freya just holding 3 bolts in her kit means that the enemy tanks can't actually aggress into my team. All they can do is just trade lightly until a couple of those bolts are gone, otherwise they're going to feel the death of 400 damage coming directly into their faces. The oppressiveness of Freya is not just because of the lingering in the air or the cooldowns, it's specifically because she has so much nested value. This led us to increase the cooldowns on her movement abilities, quick dash and updraft, while also increasing her primary weapon reload time to avoid such constant spam damage. Freya is still a devastating damage dealer, but small tweaks make her less of a terror to play against. Both her win rate and ban rate have stabilized, and we're continuously monitoring all the data to ensure that she lands in a balanced, fun state. It's stabilized at 90%. It's a charitable take on those statistics to just leave it at the fact that the ban rate stabilized. The trouble with increasing the cooldowns and increasing the reload is that if you increase the cooldowns and the reload of a nested ability where it's got a couple of charges that recharge over time, what you've effectively done is disincentivize the player from actively using those bolts proactively. The more the cooldown increases, the more the character is inclined to save those bolts for a big burst when it matters to either assassinate somebody or murder the enemy tank. By reducing her flight uptime, what we've effectively done is make her more oppressive in the other way. From now on, if you use one bolt in a double tap, it's going to take such a long time to come back that you are essentially down a load of damage and therefore a load of implied pressure on the enemy team, forcing them to not do something for a very long period of time. I think this is the Rivals problem in general, where they have 5 or 6 different buttons all on separate cooldowns that all go into their pressure, and therefore what is forced by the hero is essentially to save all the buttons to spam out at once in order to do the biggest impulse of pressure at a time, and therefore what you're basically forced to do is AFK the majority of the time until you hit the everything button and just go, go, go. Sadly, I think the DPS passive in Season 9 in general has really made this a problem, and Overwatch has become a much more passive gamer over time, with characters like Life Weaver seeing meta when they're completely reactive, because essentially the best thing to do when you can't be proactive is just stop the enemy's aggressive plays. I don't want the game to stall out over time and get slower. That sounds awful. Despite the presence of compelling data, improvements aren't so clear or immediate for some heroes. Sombra's ban rates are high in multiple regions on both PC and console, and we're currently discussing future changes. She's a complex case that can't be solved overnight, but know the balance team has her in their sights. I think Sombra is broken at conception. I think the virus was a bad idea to begin with. I think permanent stealth really can't exist at the same time as an assassination hero. Sombra has always been problematic, and I think Blizzard have only made it worse, so I'm really excited to see what they have for her, although I'm really cautiously pessimistic. Data isn't the only way we decide balance changes though, and I'm very glad it isn't, to be honest, Blizzard. Realistically, your balance changes shouldn't just be made off of the data, but should be made off of your underlying theory of the game design landscape, which should should develop over time, and I feel like it's had a couple of regressions as time goes on. Gameplay factors like the enjoyment and ease of playing a hero or their ability to keep up with the rest of the Overwatch 2 roster influence our decisions. This is basically them admitting, and we already knew it, power creep and mobility creep has got to such a ludicrous degree that OG heroes like Reinhardt need silly things like faster Firestrike in order to be able to keep up when previously they were absolutely fine as they were. One big adjustment heading to Season 17 is increasing the damage roll passive healing reduction from 25 to 30%, which should help damage dealers better contend with the amount of healing that support heroes are churning out. The basic global health regeneration timer is also increasing from 5 to 6 seconds in an effort to make damage feel more impactful within matches. Now, I have been one of the biggest proponents of Season 9 being utterly terrible and the DPS passive being utterly terrible on the internet. What you essentially do when you make it so that tapping a DPS means they have to be outside the fight for longer and you can't proactively heal them up faster is exactly the same thing as increasing Freya's cooldowns. You've made it so that you're inclined to save all of your stuff to use it in a big burst instead of proactively trading with the enemy team, making the game stale out a lot more than it did previously and making all of the moves a finishing move. The healing passive reduction from the DPS passive going from 25 to 30% is absolute insanity. This solution just completely skips the actual problem, which is support healing numbers. It was always a band-aid from the start. Is Juno has too much healing because you release them for some reason with speed and a flex support level of healing numbers so you can play Juno Kiriko with a ludicrous amount of healing and keep the tank up while providing a load of speed and DPS, then it's a problem with Juno's healing output. It's not a problem with Zenyatta's Harmony Orb. If you balance everything at once, you just leave things behind. Lower number healing sources basically already do nothing on 250 health heroes with a 25% healing reduction. What do you think they're gonna do with 30? Do you really think that Harmony Orb with 20 health per second is reasonable? And it's not just because you forget stuff when you balance in a big sweep and abilities get left behind. It's that the actual use case of these abilities changes. If my Harmony Orb is effectively healing for 20 and the DPS are going to take, what, 10 seconds to get back into a fight with it compared to 8 seconds or 6 seconds before, then realistically I should be putting that on a tank to keep them in armor instead of a DPS on an angle regardless. You are actually at all cases disincentivizing the support of DPS in a reliable way, and therefore what I think is the most interesting part of this game in the first place. If I play DPS and I go to an angle, I no longer shoot anything. And I don't shoot anything because I know that the better play is to AFK there until the exact moment that is perfectly opportunistic to be able to get into the enemy team's backline and to use my entire health bar at that point. I no longer apply stable pressure over a long period of time. I no longer distract. All I do is I just pick the correct moment and I go. This is the same thing that's made Moira feel really bad to play, while at the same time keeping Moira's win rates and her actual efficacy in terms of just left clicking the tanks actually really good. You're increasing the win rate while reducing the fun. So many Lucio content creators since Season 9 have come out and said they can't be aggressive anymore, but they don't realize that they can't be aggressive anymore because they were exactly the type of heroes that relied on low residual healing and not using their stuff in a burst in order to keep constant uptime in fights. It reduces the fun stuff. And the rationality here, all they've got is to help damage dealers better contend with the amount of healing that support heroes are churning out. Like, what are we doing? Can I have an explanation that actually makes any sense? Was anyone really complaining about tanks being immortal anyway? Or could you have just knocked Juno on the head with 5 HPS and called it a day instead of flipping the entire table one more time? And this changed the global health regen. Why? Why are you doing this? Increasing from 5 to 6 seconds, what does this do? Why have you done it? Make damage feel more impactful within matches? What does that mean? Were we really having a problem where damage didn't feel impactful because somebody was out of the fight for like 5 seconds instead of 6 seconds? Like, what does this do? We get no explanation whatsoever. I need an explanation for this in order to even start to rationalize it. Other times we zoom in on hero-specific changes that mean a lot to us. When I first joined the hero design team last year, one of my initial balance pitches was a little wild. I wanted to shrink Bastion. Our favourite cheerful Omnic does a ton of damage, but the sheer size of the character model makes him difficult to play in many situations. Bastion struggles with survivability, even though he has the largest health and armor pool of any damage hero. Now, I quite liked Bastion being silly and goofy and having a big model. I thought that was kind of the point. Sure, it is better in terms of balancing, and it probably is also better in terms of hero design and the ability to play him in loads of situations to make him smaller. But at the same point, the thing that we had, which was countering the problem which he took a load of chip damage and made it really hard for him to exist in interesting spots without having loads of healing, his self-repair got completely removed from the game in Overwatch 2 and then got put onto a perk locked behind having like 50% of a match complete. The kit already dealt with this issue, then you removed it with Overwatch 2 rework, then you put it back into the game with the perks, but only behind a playtime wall. It just seems so wasteful when the problem was already fixed in the first place. Although I was initially and correctly told it would be a difficult change to implement, I didn't really see why it's that difficult to implement given you can do it in a workshop in 20 seconds. Other departments across the Overwatch 2 team joined the cause and we took a tinier Bastion into internal testing. We found that reducing his size by 15% simply made him too cute, so we kept tweaking the numbers. Bastion's size will be reduced by 10% when Season 17 launches to give him a survivability boost. While it's not the most earth-shattering change to ever hit Overwatch, it's a testament to how many different ways we can change and balance the game for every hero. I think we all know hitbox sizes are a major balancing concern, and I'm not saying this is negative for the game in terms of balance or in terms of design, but it certainly does, in my opinion, bring stuff a little bit closer to the middle, right? He's just a DPS with a grenade now. He's no longer at its core of the design, this lumbering tank that has loads of different considerations within its kit to make the lumbering tank model work. Now he's just made him a soldier or sojourn with no mobility in a turret form. It's just slow paper cuts at the core of what made the game interesting in the first place to me. Other than a tinier and more possibly ferocious Bastion, you can expect lots of minor hero balance changes when Season 17 hits on June the 24th. Junker Queen will see some important changes to her commanding shout that prioritize ally over health, making her a more viable offensive tank choice. Surely that's just gonna make him, oh god, that's awful for 6v6. Damn, that's really, no, don't do that. No. How does that make him more offensive? Surely that makes him more defensive if you're buffing your entire team instead of you to go in. What? Perks like Farah's Helix Shield and Life Wheel's Cleansing Grass will also get some QOL improvements as well. So I'm just concerned here. Obviously, I think the concern is warranted that we're using statistics instead of our model of how the game should be in order to balance the game. But also my concern is of the things they are doing to balance the game based off those statistics. There's this Freya step where sure they balance her in terms of the win rate, but they failed to address the problems and in fact made the problems worse by not having an overarching idea of what the problems are in her kit. And then there's these changes that are just bizarre, and honestly I don't even know if I want to play 6v6 with a 30% damage roll passive. I don't think that's gonna be fun. I think it's gonna be so slow and lumbering, and make characters like Mercy and Zen who basically can no longer put out any offensive pressure with their Harmony Orb and left click, lean even further into their damage and their damage boost, and the things that actually are a lot more oppressive about their kit instead of the things that were less oppressive, such as keeping somebody in an angle or letting somebody be in the back line a little bit easier. I really hope this was going to be a proper understanding and explanation of how they're going to use hero bans to balance, but really all I can see here is just the repeated conflation between balance and design, and a failure to understand all the ramifications of the changes they make. Now, I think if this goes through to 30%, I personally have no interest in playing 6v6, and that is awful in my mind, like really awful. All the characters that I like playing, all the characters that use that slow consistent healing in order to be able to exist, honestly are just being removed by these changes. Sure, they could account for this by just increasing the healing of Harmony Orb and Mercy Beam, but as you do that, all you do is you just swish the healing throughput of Juno and Kiriko and Anna closer and closer together to Mercy until Mercy is pretty much just a worse version of those who uses damage boost instead of using the heal button because the healing button's still bad. This development update to me is very concerning. Anyway, I hope the bit was worth it. God, his hairline's terrible. Look at that. Like, he's barely got anything. Like, mine's pretty good, right? Do you think, what do you think? Mine or his? Mine or his? I've got a little bit, maybe a little bit going there. But I think aside from that, that's obviously a parting, so I think it's okay. Thanks for listening. Have a nice evening.